He had survived war, bullets, and brothers dying in his arms. But nothing prepared him for the moment he opened his wallet and realized the last $5 he owned would decide whether a trembling dog lived, or whether a broken little girl would ever learn to trust the world again. Stay with this story, because what this Navy SEAL did next didn't just save a life. It rewrote 3 shattered destinies. The dog's ribs showed through its fur, the girl wouldn't speak, and the Navy SEAL had nothing left to give, except a choice that would cost him everything. Ethan Kross had faced death more times than he could count. Afghanistan had taken pieces of him he would never get back, his sleep, his peace, and the easy smile he once had. When he finally returned home, the applause faded fast. The uniform came off. The world moved on. And Ethan was left alone with a duffel bag, a few medals he never looked at, and a mind that refused to stop replaying the past. On a gray evening soaked in cold rain, Ethan sat on a cracked bench outside a rundown bus station. His bank account was empty. His stomach burned with hunger. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the last thing he owned of any value, 5 wrinkled dollar bills. That's when he heard the whimper. Across the street, tied to a Bent Street sign, was a dog, mud-caked, shaking, and clearly abandoned. Its eyes weren't aggressive or loud. They were tired. The same kind of tired Ethan saw every morning in the mirror. People passed by without stopping. Some glanced. Most didn't. Ethan stood there frozen, telling himself he couldn't afford compassion. $5 was food. $5 was survival. Then the dog tried to stand and collapsed. Ethan crossed the street before his mind could argue. He crouched down, slowly, the way he'd been trained to approach danger. But there was no danger here, only fear. The dog flinched when Ethan reached out, then leaned into his hand like it had been waiting its whole life for someone to care. Ethan swallowed hard. He walked into the corner store, bought the cheapest dog food he could find, and used the rest on water. When he returned, the dog ate like it hadn't eaten in days. Ethan sat beside it, rain soaking his jacket, and for the first time in years, the noise in his head went quiet. That's when he noticed the girl. She stood a few feet away, half hidden behind a broken fence. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. Her clothes were too big. Her hair was tangled. But it was her eyes that stopped Ethan cold, wide, guarded, and carrying pain far older than her years. She didn't ask questions. She didn't smile. She just watched. "The dog yours?" Ethan asked gently. She shook her head. "He's nobody's," she whispered. Like me." The words hit Ethan harder than any explosion ever had. Her name was Lily. She lived in a shelter nearby, ran by volunteers who were overwhelmed and underfunded. Lily didn't talk much. When she did, it was careful, as if every word might get her hurt. She said the dog followed her sometimes, slept near the alley where she hid when the shelter felt too loud. Ethan learned enough not to ask too many questions. Some wounds spoke without words. That night, Ethan walked Lily back to the shelter, the dog limping between them. He planned to say goodbye. He had no money, no home, no plan. But when Lily reached the door, she stopped. "Please don't leave him," she said, tears finally breaking free. "Everyone always leaves." Ethan looked down at the dog, then at Lily. And in that moment, something inside him, something war hadn't managed to kill, stood back up. "I won't," he said quietly. "I promise." He didn't know how he would keep that promise. But Navy SEALs were trained to figure things out, no matter the odds. When the system failed them both, the broken soldier and the silent girl discovered that saving one life can unlock the courage to save many more. Ethan named the dog Ghost, not because he was scary, but because he moved like something that had almost faded from existence. Ghost followed Ethan everywhere. He slept beside him under bridges, outside shelters, and near soup kitchens. Slowly, as Ethan found day labor jobs and odd work, Ghost healed. And something else healed too. Ethan started visiting the shelter where Lily stayed. He didn't push. He just showed up. Sometimes he brought Ghost. Sometimes he just sat nearby. Lily began to talk, first to the dog, then in small pieces to Ethan. She had lost her parents, then her foster homes, then her faith that adults could be trusted. Ethan never said he understood. He just listened. One afternoon, Lily asked him, "Why do you look sad even when you're smiling?" Ethan hesitated. Then he answered honestly, "Because some battles don't end when you come home." She nodded like that made perfect sense. When the shelter announced it might close due to lack of funding, Lily shut down again. The fear of being moved, of losing the few safe connections she had, was too much. That night, Ethan lay awake beside Ghost, staring at the stars. He realized something painful and powerful. He couldn't save Lily by being invisible anymore. The next day, Ethan walked into a local veterans center and told his story, for the first time. About the war. About the dog. About a little girl who reminded him why he'd survived when others hadn't. Someone recorded it. Someone shared it. the story spread. Donations came in, not millions, but enough. Enough to keep the shelter open. Enough to get Ghost medical care. Enough for Ethan to find steady work helping other veterans transition back into civilian life. Months later, Lily sat on a park bench beside Ethan, Ghost resting at her feet. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time since he'd met her. "You didn't leave," she said. "No," Ethan replied. "And neither did you." Ethan didn't become rich. His past didn't disappear. But he found something better than comfort, purpose. He learned that sometimes the smallest decision, made with the last thing you have, becomes the beginning of everything. And Lily learned something too. That broken people can still build something beautiful, together. You don't need money, perfection, or a flawless past to change a life. Sometimes, all it takes is choosing compassion when it costs you the most. Because what you save in others may be exactly what saves you.